Remember that thing I said about E3 changing? Yeah, well, Square Enix is back this year, and they seem to be taking up the old Microsoft time slot for their own press conference. Now, it's not too often you hear about Square holding a press conference at E3. The last one that actually took center stage was the one where they talked up their partnership with Platinum Games about a Nier spin-off, which ultimately turned into Nier Automata. And they showed off a bit more in regards to Final Fantasy XV and Kingdom Hearts 3. This was during a time where we really didn't know just what to expect out of them, nor did anyone anticipate a press conference. So what should we expect this time? And what's this about it not being a live event, possibly a video like Nintendo's Directs instead? Let's get down to business and talk about what we know from Square Enix. It's been made clear over the years that Square has a lot to show us, or else they wouldn't need another press conference to do so. Ever since their purchase of Eidos, they've only expanded their total library in terms of franchises to take advantage of. Of that library, the new Tomb Raider franchise certainly comes to mind. And the newly revealed Shadow of the Tomb Raider, still a bad name by the way, they definitely plan to show us at least something of what to expect from the third entry in the rebooted series. If some sort of gameplay trailer or demo doesn't make an appearance here, it's almost guaranteed to be shown on either Microsoft or Sony stage, or on all three, who knows? It's a multi-platform game after all. What we also know is that it's not being worked on by Crystal Dynamics this time, but instead by Eidos Montreal for reasons that I'll talk about in the predictions section. But as someone who has thoroughly enjoyed this reboot series, I'll definitely have my eyes on this one for sure. Next up, Kingdom Hearts 3. Kingdom Hearts 3 has continually popped up with new details and info over the past few years, but without an actual release date. Many, including myself, believe that the game doesn't exist until it's in my console. At this point we know what the game is, what it's about, how it plays, and how it looks. Square has been upfront about this as much as possible, and some of the more recent footage even came with Utada's new song. All that's left now is the release date, which they claim will be sometime in 2018. The question is, when in 2018? Something I wish they said would be revealed at E3, and this press conference is the perfect avenue for it. But more on that part later. There have been some mutterings going around about a follow-up to Life is Strange, when a blog post from Deck 9 Games, the creators of the prequel, Before the Storm, spoke up about Don't Nod being hard at work on the next Life is Strange. The question is this a full-blown sequel featuring returning characters, or a brand new story altogether? Personally, I'm hoping for the latter, as the previous game wrapped up quite nicely regardless of what path you took. Whether or not we see this game at E3 is anyone's guess, considering they've only just released their new action RPG, Vampire? Just a week before the E3 festivities. But at the very least, we do know something is up for sure. Next up, Octopath Traveler, the game with the odd name yet a very striking visual style. For those still unaware, Octopath is an RPG by the team that brought you Bravely Default and Bravely Second. Veterans of those titles have a general idea of what to expect, unfortunately with a lot less. The visual style is mostly what has caught the attention of onlookers, with its 2D to 3D sprite work that hasn't been seen much outside of the somewhat similar concept used in 3D Dot Game Heroes. There isn't much else to be shown in terms of news, as the devs have been posting updates about the game since its reveal about a year ago. We know the release date, the characters will be playing, what their roles are, and just about anything else about the game in advance. So anything shown at E3 will solely be to build up hype and keep people talking and interested. Here's to hoping there isn't another Groundhog Day scenario to get the real ending. Looking at you, Bravely Default. I'm also going to keep in mind that we may not even see this at the press conference at all. Considering it's a Switch exclusive, Nintendo might just do more to promote it themselves. I think I've covered the basics of what we know, so before this video ends up 20 minutes long, let's get into my predictions. Alright, let's address the elephant in the room. The Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's been a few years since its announcement after the several prior years of teasing. We've only seen bits and pieces about it, and information has been trickling out little by little about it. But recent events in terms of the development team changing hands, and the fact that they are still hiring people to work on the game, tells me that it's still early in development. We know that the team isn't hesitant on making changes to the story to tell a better overall story about the game, and that they're taking an almost episodic approach to it, claiming that each part will feel like a full-fledged game. A tall order indeed, but one that deserves some admiration for a game that has continued to build up a cult following since the original in 1997. Regardless of its development woes, I predict that we'll at least see a brand new trailer about the game, maybe even have a release estimate to satiate the hunger of rabid fans, and not an actual release date. Although personally, I'm an advocate of taking as much time as needed to make sure the game is up to quality standards. Alright, so I previously mentioned Square promising some sort of release date for Kingdom Hearts 3 with a proverbial asterisk next to it. There is a reason for that. It's because instead of predicting that we'll see it there, I decided that I would spice things up by aiming to predict the release timeframe for the game, which is obviously 2019. I mean, come on now, let's be honest. Jokes aside, I'll give my prediction and why I believe it makes sense. I believe we'll see a November 2018 release timeframe for it. Why? Because the game is clearly far along in development, enough to let people play it early and get a good chunk of time with it, including cutscenes that are fully dubbed in English. On top of the fact that they've been much more keen to disclose plenty of information about the game, showing off new mechanics, worlds, and minigames. But outside of the state of development, there's a lot to consider about the timing for the game's release. If you look at the time between now and the release of Square's games this year, there's not a lot of wiggle room. September is quite full of games like Shadow of the Tomb Raider and Dragon Quest XI. It would be unfortunate to have Kingdom Hearts come out and practically bury the excitement for those games considering how well the franchise is over the other two. Then there's October, which is pretty packed with some heavy hitters like Red Dead Redemption 2, Black Ops 4, and Battlefield 5. The industry as a whole generally steers clear of these games because it's hard to compete when the attention is all on them. November is the perfect time for people to start shopping for the holidays, and families start getting their Christmas shopping in early to avoid the last-minute rush. I can imagine Kingdom Hearts 3 being the perfect Christmas gift for that Disney/Square fan. December is generally considered a not-so-great time to release games, as it's the end of the year and the end of the fiscal quarter for publishers that have to make earnings reports to investors. Then there's Game of the Year to consider for many publications who generally lock in their games of discussion well before December for early preparation. It's why you don't see many AAA games released in December. That was long and drawn out, but I think I got my point across, and regardless, it's just speculation. But I can talk about Kingdom Hearts until I'm blue in the face, so let's move on, shall we? So remember when I talked about Shadow of the Tomb Raider and how Crystal Dynamics isn't the primary developer on it? Well, it's time to talk about why with this next prediction. The Avengers project. It's been known for a while now that Square has a Marvel game in the works, and it was teased about a year ago. It was confirmed that Crystal Dynamics is the team on this one, which is why they're not on the next Tomb Raider game this time. This can also be seen on their website. I fully expect them to reveal just what this project is and how it ties into the whole Avengers legacy. Is it related to the MCU or something different entirely? On the cusp of Infinity War, the discussion for the Avengers is still pretty popular all around, so there may never be a better time than now to finally reveal just what this title actually is. And that about wraps up what I predict we'll see during Square's press conference. I imagine we'll see things related to Final Fantasy XV, as a new wave of DLC was announced a while back, as well as more expansions for 14, their moneymaker. But that's a given at this point, which is why I didn't end up on my knowns or predictions. But with the amount of projects that are underway that we know about from Square, it makes sense that they'd want to have a platform in which to inform everyone about them. And as a fan of quite a few of those projects, my excitement levels are pretty damn high, and I'm eager to see what else they might have coming down the line. So let's kick this over to Ubisoft, shall we? If there's one thing you can expect from Ubisoft at E3, is that you're going to see games, lots of them, and plenty of trailers to go with them. What you can also expect are new IPs as a company that seems to be willing to take bigger risks on something than almost everyone else. But this also includes reviving old franchises, and as they are also a victim of the Walmart Canada leak, we find out just what this means. The last year was quite the redemption arc for them in terms of improving their games. They spent a significant chunk of time fixing the division so that it can live up to fans' expectations. They continually fix and release new content for Rainbow Six Siege, and heavily spent development time fixing up For Honor and giving the user base the game they were looking for. Then there's Assassin's Creed Origins, which benefited in taking the extra year off from their annual cycle to take some wilder and more controversial steps in refreshing the franchise. And Ghost Recon Wildlands continued to see free content and improvements to the overall game, giving players a reason to continue returning to it, some of which was willing to blur the lines between franchises and gave hints to something unexpected. The concept of games as a service is a double-edged sword, and Ubisoft's case uses this has helped them right many wrongs in their games thus far. As we get ever closer to the big day of press conferences, the ever-present question is about what they have in store for us. And as usual, we'll start with what we know. Like Square Enix, Ubisoft also has the so-called elephant in the room, and that's Splinter Cell. A lot of people will associate this to the Walmart Canada leak, but the reality is that this has been hinted at well before that, in another game in fact. Ghost Recon Wildlands, a game that has seen an extensive amount of free DLC in its lifespan so far, saw a Splinter Cell themed mission where you get to meet the man himself, Sam Fisher. But that wasn't the biggest surprise. The real surprise came in the form of him being voiced by Michael Ironside again, the iconic voice behind Sam over the duration of the series until Blacklist, which saw his voice replaced by Eric Johnson in a very controversial move by Ubisoft in 2013. This whole ordeal immediately got people speculating that there may be a new Splinter Cell in the works. After all, why go through the process of bringing back Ironside just for one short mission in Wildlands? It would be a waste of his time if there wasn't something else going on. And then the Walmart Canada leak basically confirmed everyone's suspicions. Whether or not they'll officially announce this at E3 is the big question on everyone's minds. Since I've talked up that whole Walmart leak, let's talk about a game that also got leaked on that list. Did I mention that leaks suck, by the way? Because I feel like I haven't. Anyway, Assassin's Creed was the second Ubisoft game leaked on that list. But what made this strange is how soon this new title is after Origins, which was released last year. Considering that Ubisoft made this stance on stepping away from the annual releases to revitalize the franchise in a meaningful way, it would have made sense for them to do so again for the next title. But no one really knew what this next entry in the franchise meant until another leak happened recently where a fan found an Assassin's Creed keychain under the title of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which ultimately forced Ubisoft to announce it in advance and describe it as a follow-up to Origins, only this time it takes place in ancient Greece instead of Egypt. There were many Greek influences and inspired cities as well as a few antagonists in Origins. Perhaps they saw an opportunity to flesh out the world of Origins by making a Greek follow-up to the story. But it was confirmed that we would not be playing as Bayek or Aya this time around, but instead a new protagonist that can be chosen either male or female, which is similar to what Syndicate offered. Expecting to hear more on this at E3. There are still plenty of games that were announced at last year's press conference that have yet to be released and still won't be by the time of this year's press event. Games like The Crew 2, Skull and Bones, Beyond Good and Evil 2, which are guaranteed to have new trailers shown for each during the press conference. The Crew 2 had a beta already, so there isn't much new to be shown here, but Beyond Good and Evil 2 and Skull and Bones definitely have something worth showing. And Beyond Good and Evil 2 has been side-eyed as something that has taken a huge departure from its predecessor. And while many were disappointed to learn that we wouldn't be playing as the original cast of characters, or even in the same world, the scope of the game is what has people talking. An entire system to explore with detailed cities and quests for players to experience, along with being able to squad up with other players and complete them with their own ships or freighters, sounding similar to that of a No Man's Sky in terms of interplanetary travel and economy. It'll be interesting to see what a AAA developer can do with this kind of scope. Meanwhile, Skull and Bones, a game described as a multiplayer naval combat game, has only had a beta with not many positive things said about it. Here's to hoping that what they show this time will leave a better impression. Then there's The Division 2, something that was confirmed to be in development for some time now even before its official announcement, and as a game that is clearly in direct competition with Destiny, it was inevitable that a sequel was on the way. Its official announcement confirmed that there would be more details at E3 this year, so it's guaranteed for a showing. The questions stirring right now are whether or not this is a direct sequel in terms of story. Will it take place in New York again or move to a new location, the likes of what Watch Dogs 2 did? Another question is whether or not the Dark Zone will make a return. The idea of the Dark Zone was praised in the beginning as an original concept to offer PvP and PvE in one location. The problem was that the execution of it was so flawed in the end result that the community slowly started turning against it, which forced the developers to really assess what they could do with it. Should the concept return for the sequel, one can only hope that they take the lessons they've learned and really shake up the potential of what the Dark Zone can offer. I also personally hope that they continue to provide the same amount of post-launch support and care for the game as they did the previous entry. But wait, there's more. Last year, Ubisoft showed off immediate support for the Nintendo Switch with Mario & Rabbids, which launched to positive critical acclaim, and another game which has yet to be released called Starlink: Battle for Atlas. While this title was confirmed multi-platform, they showed off a toys-to-life peripheral that can be used with the Switch's IR sensor, similar to what amiibos do. Only this time you actually have the device on top of the controller to... I don't know, the whole thing is a big mystery, but I do know that little Alex would have been jumping out of his seat the minute this was shown. I also have no clue how this is going to work on the other platforms. To sum it up, it's a sci-fi adventure with interplanetary travel and ships that can be customized on the fly with the toy-like peripheral. Should make for some interesting weapon and ship combinations when players get creative. This one is due out in the fall of this year, but we're definitely due for a new trailer to get people talking again at this year's E3. Lastly, there's this little game called Transference. The game is supposed to be an interpersonal adventure that tackles the conventions of human and emotional experiences. This is quoted from the Ubisoft website, by the way. I'll leave a link for it in the description. There's not a whole lot to say here outside of it seeming like an experience fit for VR, and it seems to be compatible with all VR platforms, PlayStation VR, Oculus, and the Vive. Hopefully we'll see more of this at E3 as the concept seems interesting at the least. Lots of games in Ubisoft's chambers, but hey, we can finally talk about predictions. To be honest, there isn't much to predict here, as most of the games they could be showing have either been leaked or just haven't come out yet. However, if memory serves me correctly, there was one game by Ubisoft that got revealed a few years back that has yet to have any new info revealed about it, and that's Wild. No, I don't mean wild as in crazy, I mean that's the name of the game, Wild. A project that started by Rayman's creator, Michel Ancel, who was clearly hard at work on Beyond Good and Evil 2, which leaves one to question just what happened to this game in the process. Is it still being worked on, or is it a project to come after Beyond Good and Evil 2? I predict that we'll see it at this year's E3 simply because we haven't heard about it in a few years, and all we got was this strange acid trip of a trailer. That's really all there is to it in my predictions. Did I ever mention that leaks ruin the fun? Because they do. Again, I'd like to emphasize that these predictions are based on speculation and not influenced by any insider sources. Anything that happens to be accurate is through coincidence and nothing more. But if you have any games you'd like to see from Square Enix and Ubisoft at E3, feel free to comment below detailing what they are. And if you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like to let me know. As always, this is Corrupt Ronin telling you to stay sharp, assassins, and I'll see you next time.